We have asked Ryan to come up and share a little bit of his story, so we're looking forward to that. So welcome him to the stage while I saunter back to the box.
Just thankful for the opportunity just to be here. I was invited actually by Brother Fate last year. I was sitting down in Village Inn eating some breakfast, and he said, "What you doing?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Come to Park Plaza." I said, "Okay." And so after I experienced the retreat last year, I said, next year, if God's the same, I'll definitely be here. And so here we are together. So I'm just grateful for the opportunity. But I was given the assignment to just give a testimony on my personal call to leadership. And while there are many scriptures that come to mind, I think about Matthew 16, verse 24, where Jesus said, "If anyone desires to come after me, let him first deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." And I can't help but think about leadership without first being a good follower. And that's kind of what my story was. I was a youth minister in Dallas prior to moving back home to Tulsa for 4 years. Very comfortable there. Followed a great minister in Jonathan Morrison for 4 years. We grew together. I sat in a lot of leadership meetings, so I learned a lot about church culture, church operations, administration, things of that nature. And so I was very comfortable there, happy spiritually, had a great community of believers there with me. But when God began to call me, it became very uncomfortable for me. One of the things I always told myself as a kid because I've been preaching since I was 15, I told myself whenever God said move, I wanted to be ready to go. And I always told myself that. And congregation where I'm at now, Virgin Street, born and raised there, grew up there, and I knew of its struggles. I knew that it needed someone to take the reins. And also biblically, whenever God changes hands in leadership, he always goes younger. He never goes older, and so I knew that God was preparing me for that opportunity. And so it wasn't a matter of could I do the job, it's the fact that I didn't want to. And so God was, I was very happy there. And so I think about Joshua chapter number 6. We know the story, the Battle of Jericho, very, very well. And while we talk about Joshua and his succession of Moses, I think about Rahab, because we know in Joshua chapter 2, that's when Rahab, confessed her faith, and she made that pact, with the spies to be saved whenever they would come and conquer Jericho. When you fast forward to the end of Joshua chapter number 6, verse 23, Joshua told the spies, "Go and get the harlot, whom you swore to her that you would come and retrieve her." And so when they got her in verse 23, one of the things that stood out to me was that when they retrieved her, they didn't bring her right into the camp. They actually left her outside of the camp because there were some things that she had to do in her life before, she was fully accepted into the camp. And obviously we know Rahab had a lifestyle that wasn't pleasing to God. I'm not talking about my personal lifestyle, but the fact was that there were some things that she had to do before God called her. And I liken myself to her because while God called her from her lifestyle and called her to the camp of Israel, she had to get her life together, and so did her family. And so when you look at the following verse in verse 24, after they went and got her, the Bible says, but they burned the city of Jericho. And so it was, I understand in that text that while they were calling her to come to Israel and embrace the lifestyle that God had for her, she didn't have to accept it, but God removed her former life. Everything that she knew was burned. Everything she knew was destroyed. And so with me in my life when I was in Dallas, while I was very happy there spiritually, I was very comfortable, sometimes God, when he calls you to leadership, he has to touch your life so that you don't go back to what you know. And so when I was struggling with making the decision to come here and take on the congregation, God touched my money. I was no longer comfortable financially. Spiritually, my desires changed because I saw myself not getting into ministry full time until I was 32. Here I am. I was 27 when I first started. And that just shows that the plan that you have may not always be what God has for you. And so I think while I knew I could handle the job, a very good point that Brother Faye pointed out in 1 Samuel was the fact that you've rehearsed for this. God's prepared you for this. And so it's time to trust your spiritual instincts on what God has already done for you. So that was something that was really, really difficult for me. But in order for me to get that final push, God had to take away from me what was so comfortable for me. And so, now that I've accepted, my position being here at Virgin Street, I'm a lot happier, and I'll say it now. I'll go ahead and claim it. There's a blessing when you obey God. Obviously, we know that very well. And one of the the biggest blessings that I have is the fact that I found my future fiance and my wife. And, I honestly believe I wouldn't have found her if I didn't obey God first. And that just shows that when you trust God, you obey him, God has blessings for you that you never thought were on the other side of the blessing. And so that's a little bit of my testimony. The call to lead is not always easy. God may have to alter your life to get you in the position that he is, because if we're honest, leadership ain't easy. It's not easy at all. And so, God has to kind of push us and urge us and prune us to where we're ready for the position that he's calling us to be in. So that's my story. I hope it bless somebody this morning.